A girl mysteriously vanished after leaving her art class in the late afternoon, leaving no trace. Incredibly, 6 years later, a mother was scrolling through TikTok at midnight when a live stream autoplayed on her phone. The girl on screen was about 15, perhaps younger, sitting in a pink-lit room with a wall of fairy lights behind her. She was applying makeup, speaking with the ease and rhythm of someone accustomed to an audience. "Hi, everyone," the girl said with a radiant smile. "Tonight, I'm going to show you how I cover up this little scar right here." She leaned toward the camera, gently tapping beneath her left eye. A thin, crescent-shaped scar ran from the corner of her lower eyelid to her cheekbone. "It used to bother me," she continued, dabbing concealer onto the scar. "But my mom says it makes me look strong." That's when Grace Carter froze. She was sitting in bed, legs tucked under the blanket, her phone resting on her knees. For the first few seconds, she hadn't been paying attention. She'd been ready to close the app, brush her teeth, and go to sleep like any other lonely night. But that sentence, "my mom says it makes me look strong," pierced through her like ice. The girl's voice, her cheekbones, the way she tucked her hair behind her left ear with her ring finger curled under. The scar. It couldn't be, and yet it was. Grace sat upright, rewound the video, played it again, then a third time, then a fourth. The girl on screen called herself Haley. She talked about makeup, school stress, and her favorite brand of lip balm. Everything about her seemed normal, healthy, bright, confident, except she wasn't supposed to exist, because 6 years earlier, Grace Carter's daughter, Hannah, had vanished without a trace. It was March 17th, 2017, a clear Wednesday afternoon. Hannah had left her after-school art class at 4:30 p.m. sharp, as she always did, wearing her favorite lavender hoodie and carrying her sketch pad under one arm. She waved goodbye to the teacher, promised she'd be home in time for dinner, and walked out the front door. Somewhere between the art studio and the corner store, 3 blocks away, she disappeared. No witnesses, no security footage, no suspects. The police searched the area for weeks. Grace printed flyers, knocked on doors, begged the local news to cover the case. There were candlelight vigils, GoFundMe campaigns, prayer circles. Nothing came of it. After 2 years, the investigation went cold. After 4 years, Grace's name stopped appearing in news articles. People stopped asking if she'd heard anything. The posters faded from telephone poles and bus shelters, but Grace had never stopped looking. She refused to believe her daughter was dead. She believed Hannah was out there taken, hidden, renamed. She believed it so strongly that she kept a small wall in her hallway lined with maps, notes, digital breadcrumbs from chat rooms and Reddit forums. She followed every false lead. She checked every face in every missing child alert, even if the age or location didn't match. And now, by sheer accident, a live stream had found her. Grace leaned closer to the phone, heart pounding. She paused the video on the girl's face, zoomed in, screenshot, again, same nose, same dimple near the mouth when she half smiled, and most of all, that scar. She remembered the day it happened. Hannah had fallen from her bike the summer she turned 7. Face first into the curb. The wound had needed 3 stitches. Grace had kissed her forehead and told her the scar would make her look like a pirate. It had stayed. Now it was there again, faint, but still shaped like a tiny moon, on the face of a girl named Haley. Grace clicked the user profile, Haley Hopeful, 15, private account, 28 videos, 15, 200 followers. Bio, don't hide your light just because someone else fears the sun. No last name, no school listed. A location tag on one video, Corpus Christi, TX. Grace's breath caught in her throat. Texas, nearly 2,700 miles away. No ties, no reason for Hannah to be there, unless someone had brought her, unless someone had taken her. She pulled up a map, cross-referenced video timestamps, and read through dozens of user comments. Most were innocuous. "You're gorgeous. How do you blend that well, OMG? Wish I had your confidence." But one comment stood out, pinned by the account Elisa Mother TX. "That's my baby girl. Always proud of you." Grace clicked through. Private profile, bio, mama of 2, Faith before fear. Location, Corpus Christi. TX. Another jolt. She searched the name on Facebook, then Instagram, then Twitter. Each search led to fragments posts about Haley's growth, holiday dinners, church fundraisers, nothing that hinted at abduction, nothing that looked illegal, just the portrait of a loving, overly curated home life. Too clean, too perfect. Grace had learned to spot the polish people applied when they were hiding the rot underneath. The girl in the video couldn't possibly be someone else. Not with that voice, that face, that scar. Not with the way she said, "my mom." Not when she smiled like she'd practiced it in a mirror until it stuck. Grace sat frozen for another full minute. Her tea had gone cold on the nightstand. Her hands were shaking. Then she whispered aloud, "To no one, I found you." The words tasted like glass in her mouth. Hope, fear, grief, all wrapped in 5 syllables. I found you. And now, she had to get her daughter back. The next morning, Grace awoke with the ache of adrenaline still thrumming in her bones. Sleep had come in fitful waves, and when it did, it brought dreams unsettling. Fragmented scenes of a young girl's face shifting between strangers, of a hallway full of mirrors, of her own voice screaming, but swallowed by silence. But there was one image that didn't dissolve by morning light. The girl on the screen, that scar, that voice, that laugh. The brightness in her eyes like flickers of someone Grace once sang to sleep, someone who had a favorite lavender hoodie and hated orange juice with pulp. Grace sat up in bed. She hadn't even changed clothes the night before. The laptop on her bedside table was still open. Paused on the TikTok video, she hit play again. Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Haley, and today I'm going to show you how I cover up this scar. Well, I used to cover it, now I just own it. Grace leaned in. The girl's fingers fluttered over her jawline, pointing to the faint pink crescent on her left cheekbone. It curved just under the eye. As if left by a forgotten teardrop, Grace knew that scar. She had pressed gauze to it after Hannah fell off her bike the summer before she vanished. More than that, she knew the way this girl said scar with a shy smirk, as if daring the world to comment. And then she said it again. My mom says it makes me look strong. Not Grace, not her, but someone else, someone pretending. Within an hour, Grace had gathered her laptop, her notebooks, 2 old manila folders labeled Hannah Personal and Hannah Case Files, and laid them across her kitchen table like a war map. She combed through Haley's profile again. There were 32 videos over the past 6 months. Most were innocuous makeup tutorials, lip syncs, jokes about school, pets, but 3 were live stream replays, all tagged with Osh Corpus Kids, GVAA, and once, Elisa Rocks. Grace opened a new tab. GVAA Corpus Christi brought her to a website, Gulfside Vocational Academy for Adolescents, a private school founded by the Lisa Foundation for young women in transition. The homepage displayed smiling girls in uniforms, the kind of overly polished images that screamed carefully curated. There were no last names, no alumni records, no mention of student intake process. It felt too clean, too controlled. Non-Torrington. By noon, Grace was on hold with Southwest Airlines. By 12:43 p.m., she'd booked a one-way ticket to Texas. Seattle's airport buzzed with quiet tension that didn't match her interstate. Grace walked past food courts, magazine racks, security lines, all while her mind raced in fractured loops. What if she was wrong? What if this was just another false lead, like the girl in Florida in 2019, or the one in Denver who looked like Hannah but turned out to be 2 years too young? But the scar, the voice, mothers know. She clutched a small photo of Hannah, 9 years old, grinning, missing a front tooth, hair tangled from the wind. She folded it once, then again, and slipped it into her coat pocket like armor. It was almost midnight when she landed in Corpus Christi. The humidity hit her like a hand, sticky, dense, smelling of seawater and gasoline. Grace took a cab to a small motel she'd found online, the Shore Inn. It was the kind of place that charged by the week and didn't ask for ID twice. The room was modest one-queen bed, a TV bolted to the wall, and a lamp with a flickering bulb, but she didn't plan to sleep. Instead, she laid everything out on the bed: photo prints, newspaper clippings, missing posters faded from time, and now her laptop open to Haley's videos. She replayed them slowly, watching for details in the background: a school emblem on a bulletin board, a classroom number behind glass, a blurry calendar marked May events, GVAM. She paused, zoomed, took screenshots. Grace pulled out a notebook and began listing everything. Haley, 15. Estimated. Scar location match, 95%. Voice match, you left-handed. Pet in background named Milo. Hannah's old plush dog was named Milo. Coincidence. Mentions mom Lisa. Lisa Foundation, Yasin Connection. Corpus Christi, Flonore's match with current location. She added one final line. It could be Hannah. Can't afford not to find out. Morning came, thick and bright. Grace changed into a gray pantsuit she hadn't worn in years, pulled her hair into a bun, and walked into Gulfside Vocational Academy with a clipboard in hand and confidence stitched into every step. Hi, she greeted the receptionist, smiling. I'm Grace Mendez. I'm with Future Start Outreach. We're vetting institutions for possible support scholarships. Just a courtesy visit. The woman blinked. I wasn't told about. It's last minute, just observational. We're doing spot checks to ensure our grant recipients are in alignment with recovery best practices. 5 minutes, no interaction. The receptionist hesitated, then dialed an internal extension. A few minutes later, a woman entered the lobby. Blonde, 40s, lavender suit, calculated poise. Lisa Walker, she said, smiling. You must be with Future Start. Grace nodded, hand extended. Lovely to meet you. They shook. And it was in that moment Grace felt the shift, like standing before a lioness cloaked in Sunday best. The tour was quick. Hallways, classrooms, computer lab. Here's where the girls do journaling. This is our reflection nook. Over there is the chapel. Grace kept smiling, kept scanning. Until they reached the cafeteria, she spotted her, table near the window, laughing, hands gesturing wide. Haley, hair tied up, wearing a blue polo, same cheek scar, fainter now, same laugh, and when she reached for her glass of milk, left hand first. Their eyes met, and Grace felt the world collapse inward. Just for a second, one beat, a flicker of something, then the girl looked away, but not quickly, not without hesitation. Grace's throat burned. She forced herself to nod politely. Follow Lisa back to the office. Take a fake brochure. Thank them for their time. But inside her chest, a storm had begun. She exited to the parking lot with her hands shaking. She gripped the steering wheel before even getting in the car. That's her, she whispered aloud, like saying it could make it real. That's my daughter. Grace didn't remember how she drove back to the motel. Her body moved on autopilot, key in ignition, foot on gas, steering through traffic while her mind reeled with the impossible, undeniable image: Hannah, sitting in a cafeteria, smiling, breathing, alive. Every fiber of her being wanted to run back, to burst through the doors, to scream her name and pull her into her arms and never let go. But instinct held her back. She couldn't ruin this, not yet. Back at the motel, she paced the room like a caged animal. Every few seconds she stopped, stared at the photos laid out on the bed: Hannah's baby picture, her kindergarten graduation, the last photo taken before she vanished, and tried to reconcile them with the girl she had seen today. So much the same, and yet older, harder, like someone who'd learned to carry secrets. Grace poured herself a glass of water with shaking hands. Her phone buzzed, an email from her former therapist checking in. She ignored it. There would be time for emotions later. Now was the time for action. She needed a plan, a smart one, because if Lisa had any inkling of who she really was, things could turn dangerous very quickly. She started with background checks. Lisa Walker, director of GVAA. On paper, she was a philanthropist, public speaker, and child advocacy leader who'd opened her first nonprofit shelter in 2015. The shelter had since closed. Then came the school, then the foundation, each move wrapped in layers of PR gloss. But there were cracks. A Google search turned up a 2018 lawsuit quietly settled in, which a former staffer accused Lisa of forging guardianship documents for a minor from New Mexico. No criminal charges were filed. There was also a 2021 inspection report from the Texas Department of Family and Protective Services listing procedural discrepancies, including missing consent forms and lack of verifiable birth records for several girls. Buried in the notes was the name of a girl who had once gone by Jane Doe Nur 4. Age 9. Year admitted 2017. No parental contact. No known relatives. Grace stared at the screen. Hannah was taken in 2017, 9 years old. The timeline fit too perfectly. She called the local police. "I need to report a missing child who I believe has been located," she told the dispatcher. "My daughter was abducted in Washington State 6 years ago. I believe she's now in Corpus Christi." They transferred her to a detective. He was polite, professional, and skeptical. "You said she's been legally adopted." "No," Grace said. "Illegally, the woman has no proof of adoption. She's using forged papers." "You have those papers?" "No, not yet." "Then I'm afraid it's not something we can pursue without proof." Grace's voice cracked. "I saw her. She's at a private school. I know my daughter. She has the same scar, the same eyes. I'm her mother." A pause. "Ma'am," the detective said gently, "you need to go through the proper channels. If you believe a crime has occurred, file a complaint with CPS or consult an attorney. We can't act on hunches." He hung up. Grace stared at her phone, fists clenched. She could already feel the machine grinding into place. The same system that let her daughter disappear would now make it impossible to bring her home. That night, she drove back to the academy. Not to break in, just to see her, to remember how to breathe. She parked across the street under the dim orange glow of a flickering street lamp. The windows of the dormitory were dark, except for 1/3 from the right, second floor. A silhouette moved behind the curtain. Grace leaned forward. It was her, Sean Wade. Haley Hannah stood by the window, looking out, brushing her hair. Then she did something that nearly made Grace cry. She turned slightly, looked up at the moon, and mouthed the words, "Good night, Mom." Grace's hand flew to her mouth. Her whole body shook. She knew those words. It was what Hannah had said every night before bed, even after she stopped sleeping in the same room. She remembered whispering back, "Sleep tight, baby, see you in the morning." Only, there was no morning. Not for 6 years. Grace returned to the motel and stared at the ceiling until dawn. When the sun rose, she was already dressed. She'd made up her mind. If the system wouldn't help her, she'd do it herself. She returned to the school posing as a donor this time, someone interested in funding Lisa's work, a generous philanthropist from Washington. She'd called ahead, dropped buzzwords like women's empowerment and faith-based recovery, and Lisa had agreed to meet for tea in her private office. The woman greeted her like an old friend. Grace played along, letting her voice soften, her eyes crinkle with feigned warmth. "I'm always amazed by what you've built," she said. "So many girls given a second chance." Lisa smiled modestly. "It's hard work, but worth it. They deserve love." Grace nodded. "Tell me about Haley." Lisa's expression didn't change, but her pupils tightened. "She's one of our brightest," she said. "A quiet strength. She's been through a lot." Grace leaned in. "How did she come to you?" Lisa tilted her head. "Some stories. They're not ours to tell. Haley came from a situation of neglect. Her birth mother was unfit." The words hit like a slap. Grace forced her smile to stay. "Was there an adoption?" "Of course," Lisa said too quickly. "Everything is legal." Grace let the silence stretch. Then, very quietly, she asked, "Does she remember her name before Haley?" That was the first crack. Lisa's smile faltered. "Just a little. Names aren't what define us," she said finally. What matters is who we become. Grace stood. I'm her mother. Lisa didn't blink. I know who she is, Grace continued, voice low. And I know what you've done. There was a long pause. Then Lisa said, calmly, if you set foot here again without a court order, I will have you arrested. Grace nodded once and walked out. But she didn't go far. She parked across the street again that night, waiting for lights to go out. At 2:14 a.m., she crept to the back fence, climbed, moved like a shadow through the garden. She reached the dorm window, third from the right, second floor. A soft light glowed inside. She picked up a small rock and tapped the window. Once, twice, 3 times. A face appeared, frightened, curious, then recognition. Hannah, Western. Grace held up a note through the glass. It read, I'm your mother. I'm here to bring you home. Hannah stared, mouth trembling. Then she reached for the window lock. A door slammed. Putty. Footsteps. Grace bolted. She barely made it to the fence before the floodlights came on and sirens blared. She didn't stop running until she reached the car. Heart pounding, breath ragged. But as she pulled away, she looked back once and saw Hannah at the window, hand pressed to the glass. And she knew. Nisrin Mayim. Her daughter remembered. Hannah couldn't sleep. She lay curled on her side beneath the thin covers of her dorm bed, staring at the cracks on the ceiling, counting them in reverse like she always did when her mind was racing. 37, 36, 35. But tonight, numbers didn't help. Because something had shifted. Something had snapped inside her the moment her eyes met that woman's through the cafeteria window. That woman tall, tense, dressed like some kind of social worker hadn't looked at her the way adults usually did. Not like staff, or donors, or even teachers. She'd looked at her like she'd just seen a ghost, or worse, like she'd seen someone she'd lost long ago. It had been 12 hours since that moment, and Hannah still couldn't shake the strange heaviness in her chest. That woman's face had been imprinted into her memory, and no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't forget the way her throat caught, the way her eyes shimmered before she turned away. Hannah pulled the blanket tighter around her and rolled to face the window. Outside, the branches of the jacaranda tree scraped softly against the glass in the night breeze. She used to like that sound. Now it sounded like something clawing to get in. Earlier that evening, she'd asked Lisa a question she'd never asked before. Where did I come from when They'd been in the kitchen, prepping fruit plates for the morning. Lisa was slicing cantaloupe, fast and precise like always. You came from God, Lisa had answered with a soft smile. He brought you to me. But before here, Hannah pressed, do you remember where I was before the academy? Lisa didn't look up. She wiped her hands on a towel and turned. We don't talk about that, she said gently, firmly. It's not good to dwell on pain. Sweet pea. That's what she always said. It had always been enough. Until now. That night, after lights out, Hannah waited for the dorm monitors to finish their rounds, then slipped quietly out of bed. She tiptoed across the creaky floorboards, careful to avoid the noisy third plank by the door, and ducked into the small hallway bathroom. She locked the door behind her and pulled out the old iPhone she'd hidden beneath a loose tile months ago. It was outdated, had no SIM card, and couldn't make calls, but the Wi-Fi still worked. Her hands trembled as she opened Safari. She typed the name slowly, unsure where it had come from somewhere deep in the dark, like a memory whispered in a dream. Hannah Carter, Missing Girl, Seattle 2017. It took 5 seconds to load, then her breath caught. There, staring back at her from the screen, was a photo she recognized because it was her. 9 years old, freckled, grinning, missing a front tooth. Her hand flew to her mouth. The caption read, have you seen this child, Hannah Carter, abducted from Seattle, WA, on March 17th, 2017. She scrolled. There were news articles, forums, a blog titled Finding Hannah, a Facebook group with 8 Sinaloa members, photos, posters, a YouTube video of a candlelight vigil. She was everywhere. and she didn't remember any of it. Her heart pounded as she backed out of the search and opened the Notes app. She stared at the blinking cursor, not knowing what to write. Instead, she opened the camera. She looked at herself for a long time. Then she whispered, "Who am I?" The next day at breakfast, she sat at her usual table, trying not to show how the ground had shifted beneath her. The eggs were rubbery, the toast was cold, her appetite was gone. Across the room, Lisa moved from table to table with her usual breezy charm, checking in on girls, patting shoulders, laughing too loudly. Hannah watched her, looking not at her movements, but at her timing. Like she'd practiced this, like it was a performance. And suddenly, every kind word, every bedtime prayer, every "you're safe now" echoed with a new tone. What if it was all fake? That afternoon, she slipped away during study hall. Instead of going to the library, she headed for the old storage closet behind the east wing, where no one ever checked. She pulled out the phone again, searched a new name this time, Grace Carter, Seattle. There she was. Same eyes, same hair, same woman from the cafeteria. Her real mother. Tears burned behind her eyes. Grace had never stopped looking, even when Hannah had forgotten who she was. She scrolled through a blog post. "I don't know where she is, but I know she's alive. I feel her in my chest every morning. One day she'll look up and remember who she is, and I'll be there." Hannah covered her mouth, choking on a sob. She remembered the voice now, the lullabies, the bedtime stories about a moon that whispered secrets, the scent of lavender shampoo, the sound of the word "mama." Her knees gave out and she sat on the cold floor of the closet, clutching the phone to her chest. She remembered. The phone trembled in Hannah's hands. She stared at the blinking cursor in the Notes app, trying to form words her heart wasn't ready to say. She erased the sentence 3 times. Finally, she typed, "I think I'm your daughter. My name here is Haley. Please come back. I remember you." She paused, staring at the message. Then she added the only detail she knew that might make it real. "You always called me Bug." She took a screenshot and stared at it, not daring to send it through any platform. The academy's Wi-Fi had restrictions. Everything was monitored. Even the staff didn't use unapproved apps. But maybe if she could get close enough to the gate again, close enough to pick up a public network. Her heart pounded. She closed the phone, shoved it back into its hiding place beneath the tile, and wiped her eyes. Then she walked out into the hallway with a calm face and a boiling storm in her chest. That night, she watched the moon rise. Same window, same view, same branches scratching at the glass. But this time, it wasn't a lullaby, it was a countdown. Across town, Grace hadn't left the motel since her confrontation with Lisa. She knew she couldn't risk showing her face at the school again, not without consequences. The moment she'd declared herself, everything had changed. If Lisa had doubts before, now she had reason to act. Time was running out. She paced the room, wore grooves into the carpet with her sneakers, reread old documents and paused every few minutes to stare out the blinds into the dark parking lot. Her phone buzzed. A text, unknown number, no words, just a photo. The screenshot of a note. "I think I'm your daughter. My name here is Haley. Please come back. I remember you. You always called me Bug." Grace dropped to her knees. Tears filled her eyes so fast she barely noticed the pain as she fell forward, hand clutching the edge of the bed. She reread it 5 times, then typed back, "I'm here. I never left. Tell me how to get you out." At 2017 at 9 a.m., her phone buzzed again. Another photo, a crude map of the school building, one hallway circled in blue, a short message below. "East wing, supply room, emergency exit, red handle, no alarm. I can get there tomorrow night after lights out. Please don't be late." Grace took a screenshot and opened the GPS. The alley behind the building ran parallel to the emergency exit. It would be close, fast, 2 minutes in and out, if she timed it right. But she'd need cover and silence and someone watching her back. The next morning, Grace called someone she hadn't spoken to in 5 years. Ben, she said when he picked up. A pause. "Grace." I need a favor. Ben Vargas was a retired cop who had helped with Hannah's case early on. He'd stayed longer than most, gone over every lead, every call, even traveled to Nevada to check a tip that turned out to be fake. He had left the force 2 years ago, disillusioned. But when Grace told him what she'd found, what she'd seen, what she'd planned to do, he didn't hesitate. "I'm in," he said. "I'll bring my old radio. We do this clean, fast, no screw-ups." That night, Grace sat in the car, engine off, headlights off, heart hammering like a war drum. She checked her phone, 2:01 a.m. Ben was across the street, parked behind a dumpster, watching through binoculars. Windows open. His voice crackled through the walkie. "You've got 5 minutes." Grace slipped out of the car and moved through the shadows, her shoes whispering over gravel and dried leaves. She reached the side gate, climbed it in one breathless motion, found the red-handled door Hannah had marked. She pressed her ear to the metal. Silence. She opened it an inch. Then two. Then, when a figure moved through the hall. She froze. "Hannah," she whispered. The girl stepped into the light. Older, taller, but the same eyes, same mouth. "Son of a bug," Grace breathed. Hannah didn't speak. She dropped into her mother's arms like a branch falling into water. Grace held her so tightly it hurt, but neither of them let go. Ben met them at the alley's edge. No sirens, no alarms, just the sound of breathing and the pulse of the universe turning back on itself. Grace helped Hannah into the car. They drove without speaking for 10 miles. Then Hannah whispered, "Was I gone a long time?" Grace reached for her hand. "You were always with me." The morning after they escaped, Grace woke in a motel room an hour outside Corpus Christi, not sure what had jolted her awake until she heard it. Breathing. Not her own. Soft, shallow, rhythmic, coming from the second bed. For one split second, she thought it might have been a dream, that Hannah Haley her daughter was still locked behind that window, still wearing a name that didn't belong to her. But then she turned her head, and there she was, sleeping, curled into herself, like she had when she was 7, her face softer now. No makeup, no posture, no performance, just a girl, a daughter, breathing in her sleep. Grace's throat tightened. For a moment, she didn't move, didn't dare breathe too deeply, as if the motion itself might wake the storm again. She had her daughter back, and she didn't. Not legally, not permanently, not safely. Not yet. 2 hours later, they sat across from each other at a diner booth off Highway 77. Neither had touched their pancakes. The waitress poured coffee, asked if they were okay. Grace nodded. Hannah stared out the window. Finally, Hannah spoke. "I remembered the smell first." Grace blinked. "What smell?" "The shampoo. Yours." She didn't look at her. "Lavender and lemon. I remembered it when I saw you at the cafeteria, but I didn't know why." Grace swallowed. "I used to wash your hair with it." "I remembered that too, but it felt like a movie I saw a long time ago." She paused, like I was watching someone else's life. Grace wanted to reach across the table and touch her hand, but didn't. Instead, she said, "That's not your fault. I used to believe everything Lisa told me. She said my mom was a junkie, that I'd been rescued." She finally looked at Grace. "I thought you didn't want me." Grace couldn't hold back the tears this time. "They lied to you." "I know." Hannah looked down at her hands. "But what if I'm not the girl you lost anymore?" Grace reached across the table then, placed her hand over Hannah's. "You're the girl I've been waiting for. Whoever you are now, whatever's changed, you're still mine." By midday, Grace knew they couldn't stay in hiding. The police would be looking. Lisa would have filed a missing persons report by now, ironically, accusing Grace of abducting her own daughter. They needed help, legally, officially. Grace called Ben. "You need to go public," he said. "Let people know what happened. Create pressure. It's the only way the state won't try to return her." Grace hesitated. "She doesn't want to go back." "I know, But the law doesn't care what she wants yet. They care about papers, and Lisa has them. Grace felt a cold anger bloom in her chest. She'd spent 6 years being invisible to the law. Now, finally found, they'd accuse her of kidnapping. She hung up and made the next call. The lawyer's name was Darlene Voss, a woman in her 50s with a sharp voice and a reputation for chewing through bureaucracy like a wood chipper. She had worked on several wrongful custody cases in the past, and when Grace told her the story, she went quiet. Then said, "You have proof? Photos, videos, DNA if needed. And the girl will testify, if we do worry, what's good my wants." Grace looked at Hannah, sitting cross-legged on the motel bed. Flipping through an old picture book Grace had brought with her years ago, she nodded slowly. "Yes," Darlene exhaled. "Then we've got a case, but it won't be clean." That afternoon, a local reporter from Corpus Christi Times met them at a safe location, a church basement offered by one of Ben's old friends. The article was online by sundown. Mother claims daughter found after 6 years missing, but legal battle just beginning. Within hours, Grace's phone was flooding with messages, some supportive, some accusatory, some from strangers who had followed the Finding Hannah Facebook page since the beginning. But most were just one line: "Don't stop now." Meanwhile, Hannah scrolled through the article quietly, her face unreadable. Finally, she said, "They're going to call me a liar, aren't they?" Grace sat beside her. "Some might. I don't remember everything yet. Just flashes, feelings. I remember your voice, a song, the word bug. But I don't know if that's enough." "It's more than enough," Grace whispered. "And it'll come back. Maybe not all at once. Maybe never fully. But I didn't wait for memories. I waited for you." Hannah leaned into her shoulder then, like a thread returning to fabric. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was connection. And that was where healing would begin. The subpoena arrived 2 days later. Typed in bold, "Grace Carter is hereby ordered to appear in court under allegations of custodial interference, abduction of a minor, and failure to comply with legal guardianship orders." It felt like a slap in the face. Grace stared at the document, jaw clenched, her hand tightening around the envelope until the paper crumpled at the edges. She'd known it was coming. Ben had warned her. Darlene had warned her. But reading it, seeing her name printed above the word defendant, it tore something open inside. Across the motel room, Hannah sat quietly, watching. "They're calling you a kidnapper," she said. Grace nodded. "They think I belong to her." "Yeah, they're wrong." "I know." There was a long pause. Then Hannah added, "We'll show them." The courtroom in Corpus Christi was sunlit and sterile, all beige walls and polished wood in quiet tension. Lisa arrived first, flanked by 2 lawyers in navy suits. She wore a pale pink dress, pearls at her neck, her hair swept into a perfect chignon. From a distance, she looked like the poster child for Southern virtue until her eyes met Grace's. They were cold, flat, like glass over poison. Grace held Hannah's hand tightly. They sat at the defendant's table beside Darlene, who was flipping through a thick file of documents with the kind of precision that made prosecutors nervous. The judge entered, everyone stood, and the hearing began. Lisa's attorney spoke first. He painted a picture of Grace as unstable, obsessed, a woman who had latched onto a random teenager and was trying to force her into a false identity. He cited Grace's past therapy records, her erratic behavior, and claimed she had brainwashed the girl now known as Haley. Then Lisa took the stand. With practiced tears, she told the court she had rescued Haley from a harmful environment, that the girl had no memory of her past, and that she'd raised her with every ounce of love a mother could give. "She calls me Mom," Lisa said, dabbing at the corner of her eye with a silk handkerchief. "She always has." Grace nearly rose to her feet, but Darlene's hand on her arm kept her grounded. "Let her finish lying," Darlene whispered. "Then we destroy her." When it was Grace's turn, she stood slowly. "My daughter was taken from me 6 years ago," she said. "I never stopped looking. I never stopped hoping. And now that I've found her, You want to accuse me of kidnapping her? She turned to the judge. You have her DNA. You have her childhood records. You have every photo I've ever taken of her. Compare them. Ask her what she remembers. Because the truth is, you're not deciding who she belongs to. You're deciding whether the truth matters more than the paperwork Lisa forged to keep her hidden. There was a pause. Kumasha Zasorin. Then Darlene stood and called the first witness. Ben Vargas, Sarpateverne, Ben Vargas. The former officer took the stand, composed and clear. He testified about the original investigation into Hannah's disappearance, the search efforts, the false leads, and finally, the dead end. Then he described the recent events, the TikTok video, the visual match, the escape, the girl's reaction, the handwritten note with a phrase only Hannah and Grace would know. He ended with this: there is no doubt in my mind that Haley and Hannah are the same person. Next came the expert witness and independent forensic analyst. He held up a folder. These are the DNA results from a buccal swab taken from the girl identified as Haley. It matches with 99.997% certainty to Grace Carter. He handed the folder to the judge. Medically, genetically, and biologically, she is her daughter. Lisa's lawyers objected. They said the test was obtained without consent, that the girl was confused. That identity was about more than genetics. They asked the judge to strike the results, but the judge didn't. Instead, she asked Hannah to speak. For a moment, the room was silent as Hannah stood. She looked smaller than she had days ago. No makeup, no polish, just a teenager in jeans and a sweater that hung too loose on her frame. My name is Hannah Carter, she said softly. Then louder, I didn't remember at first, but then I did. I remembered the song my mom used to hum when she brushed my hair. I remembered the way she called me Bug. I remembered the lavender soap, and I remembered that Lisa always told me to forget. She turned toward Lisa. You told me my mom didn't want me, that she gave me up, that I was lucky to be with you. Hannah's voice didn't tremble. But I wasn't lucky. I was stolen. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Lisa sat frozen. The judge raised a hand. That's enough. Miss Carter, thank you. After a brief recess, the court reconvened. The judge's ruling was swift. The evidence presented, both physical and testimonial, makes it unequivocally clear that the girl known as Haley Walker is, in fact, Hannah Carter, the biological daughter of Grace Carter. The custody rights previously claimed by Ms. Walker are hereby revoked. Legal guardianship is restored to Ms. Carter effective immediately. A beat of silence. Then the gavel. Then the tears. Outside the courthouse, the crowd of reporters and onlookers buzzed like a swarm. Cameras clicked. Questions flew. Grace and Hannah stood side by side, blinking in the sun. Do you feel vindicated? One journalist shouted. Grace looked at her daughter, then said, I feel like I can breathe. That night, in the motel, they sat together on the floor beside the bed, a bowl of popcorn between them and an old Disney movie playing low on the TV. Grace looked over and saw Hannah dozing off, head resting on her shoulder. And for the first time in 6 years, she whispered, sleep tight, Bug, see you in the morning. And this time, there would be a morning. The morning light in Seattle had changed since the last time Grace had walked Hannah across their old front lawn. Everything had changed. The house they returned to was the same one Grace had kept all these years, same chipped mailbox, same creaky porch swing, same magnolia tree bending low over the walkway, but it felt smaller now, quieter, as if the walls themselves had held their breath for 6 years and didn't know how to exhale. Hannah stood on the front steps with her arms crossed, a duffel bag slung over one shoulder. She wasn't crying. She hadn't cried since the day they left Corpus Christi. But her eyes had been clouded since the ruling, like something inside her hadn't caught up yet. Looks just like I remembered, she murmured. Grace turned the key in the lock. You were 9 the last time you saw it, she said. I remember the porch, a pause, and the tree swing. You used to think it was a dragon's tail. A small smile tugged at the corner of Hannah's mouth, then vanished. She stepped inside. The air smelled like cedar and dust and something faintly floral. Grace's attempt to make it smell like home. But home wasn't a scent. It was something else, something they'd have to find again. They spent the first few days learning how to be in the same room again. Grace kept the fridge full, kept her schedule open, asked questions carefully, never too many at once. She offered tea in the morning, dinner in the evenings, space always. Hannah mostly stayed upstairs. She played music with her headphones on, scrolled quietly through her phone, wrote things in a notebook Grace never asked to read. She didn't sleep much. Sometimes Grace could hear her pacing at 2 a.m., her steps light and fast like someone trying to outrun thoughts. They were strangers with the same blood. Connected by biology, separated by time, bound together now by something else possibility. The press didn't help. Within a week, Hannah's face was everywhere from morning shows to podcasts to social media. Every outlet had their own spin. The girl who remembered. Hannah versus Haley. The great custody hoax. Some were kind, some were cruel. She's probably lying. Brainwashed by the birth mother. Lisa should sue for defamation. Grace wanted to scream every time she read them. Instead, she emailed a single quote to every journalist who asked for comment. My daughter isn't a headline. She's a person reclaiming her name. One evening, a local reporter named Maddie came by for a scheduled interview, an exclusive with Grace and Hannah. I don't want to talk about Lisa, Hannah said before the meeting. Not even once. You don't have to, Grace told her. You say what you want, or nothing at all. They sat on the couch, side by side, as the camera crew set up lights. Maddie was gentle, professional. She started slow. What's the first thing you remembered when you saw your mom again? Hannah hesitated. The word bug, she said finally. I didn't know why it mattered, but when she said it, it felt like everything in me stopped hurting for a second. Maddie nodded. And what's been the hardest part since people thinking I'm someone I'm not? She looked down. I don't know who Hannah is yet, but I know I'm not Haley. That quote went viral the next day. And for once, the comments were kind. The real turning point came a week later. Grace came home from the grocery store to find Hannah in the kitchen, standing at the stove, staring blankly at a saucepan of boiling water. Grace set the bags down quietly. You okay? Dürfen. Hannah turned, startled. I wanted to make pasta. You hate pasta. I used to love it. At least, I thought I did. I don't know anymore. Grace stepped closer. It's okay not to know. Hannah nodded, eyes glistening. I don't remember how I used to be. Not really. I remember sounds, smells, a stuffed dog named Milo, but everything else feels like trying to hold fog. Grace swallowed. You don't have to be the girl you were. Hannah looked at her. You still want me, even like this? Grace didn't move. I never wanted her back, she said softly. I wanted you, exactly who you are right now. And that finally broke something open. Hannah stepped forward and let herself fall into her mother's arms. They stood there, the pot boiling over behind them, neither moving. And for the first time since coming home, they felt like they belonged to the same moment. Later that night, they sat together on the back porch, wrapped in blankets, sipping tea. The stars shimmered faintly overhead, filtered through a cloudy sky. Do you think I'll ever be normal? Hannah asked. Grace tilted her head. I don't even know what that means. Hannah smiled. Fair. They sat in silence for a while. Then Grace reached into her pocket. I want to show you something. She pulled out a photo creased, faded at the edges. It was Hannah at 6, wearing a paper crown, holding a wooden spoon like a scepter. Grace sat behind her, pretending to kneel like a loyal knight. Hannah stared at it. I remember this, she whispered. You let me eat dessert first that night. Because you were the queen. You called me Queen Bug. Grace smiled. You still are. 2 months later, the world had moved on. The story faded from headlines. Other cases took its place, new tragedies, new heroes, new hashtags. But for Grace and Hannah, life wasn't about attention. It was about learning how to live in the quiet that followed. The quiet was sometimes peaceful, sometimes unbearable. Some mornings, Grace would come downstairs and find Hannah already dressed, sitting on the porch, earbuds in, staring at the sky. She didn't ask what her daughter was thinking. Some thoughts had to be left alone. Instead, she'd bring a cup of tea, place it beside her, and sit in silence until Hannah was ready. Sometimes that was enough. Sometimes it wasn't. Therapy was part of the court order. Hannah had resisted at first. "I don't need someone dissecting my head," she'd muttered. But Grace didn't push. She simply offered a quiet reminder. Not everything broken has to be thrown away. Some things just need help to open again. So Hannah agreed. Her therapist's name was Mira, early 30s. Kind, patient, never pushed too far. Their first sessions were mostly quiet, long silences, a few tears, an occasional joke, usually dark. But then, one day, Hannah asked Mira, "What if I like being Haley?" Mira didn't flinch. "Did you?" "I don't know," Hannah admitted. She had confidence. She was good at makeup. People listened when she talked. "Do you think those things aren't still part of you?" Hannah paused, then whispered, "Maybe." It wasn't a breakthrough, but it was a crack of light. And light was enough. Meanwhile, Grace began writing again. She hadn't touched her blog since the trial. The entries had once been like oxygen notes to a missing child, a ritual to keep grief from eating her alive. But now, with Hannah home, she didn't know what to say. Until she realized she wasn't writing to Hannah anymore. She was writing to the parents still searching, the ones whose children hadn't come back yet. Her first post in months began simply, "They called me crazy, obsessive, desperate, and they were right, but I never let them make me quiet, because the moment you stop shouting their name, the world forgets they were ever real." She wrote every day after that. Not about herself, about them, the lost, the found, the ones in between. Hannah, too, started posting again, not on TikTok, but on a new account, anonymous, private, just text. She wrote things like, "Sometimes I miss the name they gave me, but I don't miss the girl I had to be to survive it." Or, "Healing doesn't feel like fireworks. It feels like watching a door stay open when you used to expect it to slam." Grace found the account by accident. She didn't tell Hannah, but she read every word. Sometimes twice. One Sunday, they went to the farmer's market together, the same one they'd visited years ago, before everything fractured. Hannah wandered off to look at handmade jewelry while Grace picked tomatoes. A woman at the next stall tapped her arm. "You're the one from the news, aren't you?" she asked. Grace froze. The woman smiled gently. "I just wanted to say thank you for not giving up." Grace nodded. "Thank you." Then the woman added, "My niece disappeared in 2011. Still no sign." Grace's throat closed. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "Truly." The woman looked toward Hannah. "She looks like she's healing." "She is," Grace replied. Then added, "We both are." That night, as they cleaned the kitchen together, Grace asked, "You still want to change your name?" Hannah paused, mid-dish. "I don't know. Haley got me through some hard stuff, but she's not mine anymore." Grace nodded. "So what name do you want?" Hannah thought, then said, "Can I have both?" Er, both. "Hannah Haley Carter," she said, "so I don't forget who I was, or who I became, or how far I came back." Grace smiled. "It suits you." On what would have been the 7th anniversary of Hannah's disappearance, they lit a candle in the backyard. Just the two of them. Not for mourning, but for memory. Hannah held the flame in silence, eyes glowing in the soft light, then whispered, "You found me." Grace didn't speak. She simply wrapped her arms around her daughter and held her until the candle burned down. Weeks later, Grace received an email from a woman in Oklahoma. Subject line, "Saw a girl who looked like your story." Attached was a blurry photo from a gas station camera of a girl, maybe 15, being led away by an older man. The message was short. "I could be wrong, but something about her eyes felt off." Grace replied immediately. She forwarded it to Ben, to Darlene, to Mira. She sent it everywhere. Because that was the promise she'd made. Hannah was home, but others weren't. And sometimes, all it took was one person refusing to look away.